Alright guys, we are going to be reacting to Germany is suddenly becoming insanely powerful. Again, thank you so much for the support, guys. Again, I just want to reiterate, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. We're trying to get to that 10,000 subscribers. So if you can simply just subscribe to the channel, I'm going to really appreciate it. Let's jump in.
You know, it's simply fascinating how much can change in a century. In 1939, the last time that Germany rapidly rearmed itself and moved across Polish territory, using Poland as a staging ground so that their soldiers could have easier access to Russian territory, their neighbors weren't exactly thrilled about that, to say the least. But now here we are almost a century later, and by 2039 it seems that Germany's current neighbors would now be thrilled if they did exactly that. Now, of course, I say this rather tongue-in-cheek. I am not trying to compare modern Germany to Nazi Germany, if anything, quite the opposite, to show how much has changed so rapidly. Nazi Germany, of course, 100 years ago was arguably the single greatest threat to democracy, certainly in Europe. But now here we are approaching 2039, and Germany is trying to set themselves up as the single greatest hope for democracy, at least in Europe.
Interesting.
Because Germany is currently in the process of a rapid remilitarization that is aimed to be completed by the year 2039, when they hope to be the largest, most powerful conventional military force in all of Europe, exactly 100 years after Nazi Germany invaded Poland. But while the anniversary is striking, it shouldn't distract us. And while that time frame might seem like it is forever away when there is a war in Europe happening right now, it turns out that a lot of the progress towards that ultimate goal has already been made and is rapidly being made much faster than most people ever thought was possible. Germany is rapidly becoming a military powerhouse again. In fact, they are receiving approximately 90% of all investment in Europe that is going towards building more military equipment. And you could say that Germany is kind of seeking to take the role of the new arsenal of democracy, a role that has recently been at least partially vacated by the United States. Though they still use that language of themselves, they are rapidly retreating from that role, and they're not trying to hide from that fact. The United States is trying to push Europe to do things on their own. And Germany, either out of necessity or out of opportunity, is rising to that challenge. German society is changing rapidly, and a lot of people haven't noticed yet. But the people who are inside of Germany in these particular sectors, they certainly have. And just as evidence for how fast things can change, just take a look at the stock for Rheinmetall and how much it has produced over the past couple of years. There are big changes coming, and it will not just be restricted to Germany or Europe, but rather what we're seeing in Germany today is going to have geopolitical repercussions 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and certainly well into the future. Now, what is happening in Germany today with rearmament should certainly perk us all up to attention. And yes, that is because of Germany's history. But we shouldn't pay attention to Germany's rearmament in the same way that we should have paid attention, for example, back in 1939. But rather, we should pay attention to Germany's rearmament today, precisely because Germany is a country that has learned so many lessons from that era. Germany, of all countries in the world perhaps, does not want to repeat the mistakes of the former century. And Germany, of all countries in the world perhaps, understands exactly how a dictator thinks. They understand exactly how a dictator can get control over society. And they understand exactly how deadly that can be. And they understand exactly the only way to stop a dictator like that, and that is through actual force, not through hopeless, pointless negotiation with somebody who isn't interested in negotiating. Germany has studied their history, and right now they see history repeating, not within their own territory, but in the Kremlin, in Russia. In fact, Germany, a country that for so long has sought to prevent the reoccurrence of the past by not rearming itself, by not creating weapons of warfare, has now had a change of heart. And they realize that they need to create weapons of warfare, and they need to create them rapidly. Because there is an enemy where there is a good chance that enemy is not going to stop until they are actually defeated on the battlefield. This is in many ways a scary new era that we're entering, but if you watch my channel, you're already familiar with that. But in a lot of ways, it's also a hopeful new era, because a lot of the fears that people have had.
Well, at the same time, do you think Russia's a real threat? I mean, I'm just being impartial here. I'm just asking some of the questions. When I see the Russian military, I mean, it's big. It's a big military, but I don't see a real threat with the Western Europe. Comparing all the military from all the Western European countries, it's not even close, man. Like the Western country, they have massive arsenal to go against Russia. Russia's not there, in my opinion.
With the shifting sands, you'll realize today that Germany is solving a lot of problems, and they're filling a lot of holes that people have been wondering how they would be filled, and they're doing it quicker than we ever thought. A very specific set of conditions right now that is both causing and allowing Germany to rearm at one of the fastest paces in history. And when I say that, most people will immediately, of course, think of the war in Ukraine. But that is not the only cause for what's happening in Germany. It is, of course, a major cause. It is a catalyst. It provides the reason for Germany to want to rearm, but it doesn't explain why they've been so successful at doing it so quickly. And to understand what's really going on, you first have to understand that Germany is having a little bit of a crisis right now. But in some ways, if you're going to have a crisis, this is the best possible timing to have a crisis of this sort. Germany's crisis has to do with their auto export industry, which is, of course, a major driver of revenue for the country. German engineering is famous, but recently car companies have been having a tough time. For example, Mercedes in 2025 saw a reduction in profit of 49% from the previous year. Volkswagen saw a reduction in profit of 44%, and I think it was Porsche that saw a reduction of approximately 98% in operating profit in 2025 versus 2024. Now, this is, of course, catastrophic for Germany in a lot of ways.
Any reason why that's the case? I saw those numbers, but I was not sure. I think I saw those numbers at the end of the last year or something like that. I don't remember. And I was asking myself, what's the reason of these kind of losses? These are big losses in the auto industry.
Similar to how it's been catastrophic for certain communities in the United States that have lost a lot of their manufacturing jobs as the auto industry is hollowed out. And there's all sorts of reasons for this. That's not what this video is about. A large reason is that China is now producing a lot more vehicles. And obviously, there's just the geopolitical situation as a whole. In either case, though, it is causing a shift in how Germany thinks about the future of work. And while that's terrible, and it's causing a lot of losses of jobs and things of that sort in Germany, from one perspective, again, it's the perfect timing, because it's happening at this time where the war in Ukraine has created this massive industrial need. A need for more weapons systems, more of the weapon systems that already exist, but also in particular, a need to create factories or retool factories to create brand new weapon systems, of course being things like drones and drone components. This has turned into a golden opportunity for
the auto industry,
auto companies. And while the shift is just sort of starting to happen, it's very real. A lot of auto companies have realized that this is their time to shine. A lot of their expertise happens to carry over to the weapons industry, even if it is a different product. It still requires similar engineering skills and similar manufacturing lines. And in many cases, the process of retooling these lines isn't as complicated as a non-expert like myself might think. It's not like plug and play, but it is enough that Germany can retool very quickly. And a lot of the infrastructure that is needed to rebuild a weapons industry and build it up bigger than ever before already exists. And there's a lot of people with engineering skills, manufacturing skills, that are looking for precisely those jobs. Because of this, the acceleration is rapid. So rapid, in fact, that Germany is now set to produce Patriot missiles even for the United States, getting a contract, a license to produce the Patriot missiles on German soil. That being said, all of this is just the beginning. I already mentioned that Germany is currently receiving 90% of European investment in new defense spending, and that is a big deal. Germany itself has recently changed their laws to actually allow them to go past their normal deficit limits,
Deficit, yep.
specifically to fund their military. And because of all of these different things, there are just billions and billions of euros in capital for German firms to take advantage of to scale up production even further. It's sort of a self-feeding cycle. Because Germany already has so much manufacturing expertise, because so much infrastructure is already there, that is driving more investment towards Germany rather than the other countries that surround it, at least for this specific purpose. And that is allowing Germany to build deeper expertise, which, of course, in the future will almost certainly drive even more investment towards Germany.
But again, you have to have kids for that too. You have to your population has to increase to even just get those numbers up. I think a lot of these problems can just be resolved with having kids. Identifying the percentage of how many folks are basically how can I say this? How many men, for example, or what's the population of Germany where they go to the military? Identify that percentage. And based on that percentage, now you say, you know what? In order for us to really double or triple that number, how many kids do we need to have per woman? That's another way to do it. And then you save a little bit of that money, right? I mean, or you can just get to that place faster. Also, think about this. In the future, you will need more taxes to just get some of these new tools in the ground. You need taxes. Where are you going to get taxes? There's no kids. There's no humans, basically. So you have to have more kids.
So Germany,
in my
even if we
opinion,
look at projected numbers right now, they're projected to become the largest conventional military in Europe by 2039. I would argue that that is likely to accelerate rapidly. We've seen in the war in Ukraine how much things have changed just in a couple of years. I would argue we're going to see a lot of investment in Germany over the next decade, above and beyond what we've currently seen, where Germany might be unrecognizable in approximately 10 years.
Wow, really?
That said, this is only one side of the equation. This is just talking about Germany's ability to produce military equipment at scale. But Germany knows that there is more to fighting a war than simply having military equipment.
Correct.
And make no mistake, Germany is preparing for a worst-case war scenario. A massive ground war in Europe. Not something that anybody wants, or perhaps something that anybody even expects, but something that you certainly want to be prepared for if there's even a chance of it happening. So Germany is also investing very heavily in their infrastructure, specifically so that they will have redundant pathways to transport military equipment from Western Europe towards Eastern Europe if a war were ever to break out. This will allow all of this equipment to not just sit in factories or not just rely on one or two railways that, for example, Russia can easily take offline, or at least theoretically take offline. It will allow Germany to actually transport things where they're needed. And this is perhaps one of the most brilliant parts of the strategy. Again, not to compare modern Germany to Nazi Germany, but militarily, one of the most brilliant things that Nazi Germany did before World War II was to invest in the Autobahn system, the highway system, so that they could easily move goods and materials across the country. We're seeing sort of a modern version of that, which is good military thinking, good military strategy, and that's happening in Germany today. And actually what we're seeing from Germany is some really good, in my opinion, I know there's complexities to this, but some really good macro level planning for their country. They understand that they have two needs right now. They have a need to protect Europe from Russia. They also have a need to rewire their economy and make sure that all these people who are losing jobs have somewhere to go. And so they are spending money from the government coffers, but they're not just wasting it. They are spending money from the government coffers, investing it in building up more infrastructure so they could be the most powerful military that can not only protect themselves, but also a country that will be well positioned to take a big bite of the pie of the former US arms industry
Mm.
and the former soft power that the US used to get from that. Now, I say former, and of course, the US arms industry still exists, and it exists to a large degree, and it probably always will. But big chunks of that are very likely to go away very soon. At the current moment, there are a lot of countries that want to move off US systems that can't yet because there are not viable alternatives. But as soon as viable alternatives exist, they will rapidly switch over, and this is not a secret. This
Mm-hmm.
is largely because of what the United States has done around Ukraine. And as Americans, we can argue about why people shouldn't feel this way, or we can make fun of Europe for feeling this way. It doesn't matter. It turns out that Europe feels this way, and from their
Yeah, that's what matters. If they feel that way, that's what matters. That's what they perceive that's the best option for them.
perspective, they
That is
certainly
what it
have
is.
genuine reasons for feeling that way. Because what the United States did in Ukraine was they allocated military aid to Ukraine, particular weapon systems that Ukraine became reliant on, and then with zero warning, we pulled the rug out from under them. We stopped deliveries, we stopped support for the systems,
Yeah.
all sorts of things, and we did it several times. And we did it in order to negotiate better terms for ourselves in deals that we were working on with Ukraine, for example, a minerals deal. And the world watching this saw, wow, we can't really trust the United States because if we rely on them, they can use that reliance
That's true.
to try to take advantage of us. And again, it doesn't matter how you feel as an American.
Yep.
It's obvious why other countries would feel that way.
Yeah, if we do stuff like that, you should not be mad if some of these countries, of course, they change their tune towards the United States.
For the United States, this is a pretty big problem. Our arms industry has brought us a lot of revenue over the years. And the fact that other countries purchase our weapon systems, in a lot of cases, is what actually allows us to fund the research and development of those weapon systems and allows us to have the major advantage of actually producing those weapon systems, owning the intellectual property, and all of that. But now people are realizing that since they can't trust us, they want to move to other systems. And the United States is going to lose a lot of profits from this, not just directly from the weapon sales, but from the soft power that we got from being able to hold those weapons sales over people, either specifically like we did in Ukraine and rather aggressively, or just kind of in the back end as an influencing factor. Germany, I think, understands this. They understand that there is soft power on the table for whoever can become the next generation weapons dealer. And they are rapidly working to integrate the learnings from Ukraine and to master that and build that in their own infrastructure so that they can become the arsenal of the West for the future. It is a well-proven geopolitical strategy that has worked many, many times over the past several centuries. Both for good players and for evil players, it's an effective strategy. Now, with that in mind, what's happening in Germany today is going to have some massive impacts, both in the short term and in the long term. In the short term, it's rather encouraging, because even though the problems with Germany's auto industry are bad for Germans, and I don't want to dismiss that, it turns out that this is an opportunity for Ukraine that gives them more durability and an ability to sustain their war against Russia. Because a lot of these auto facilities that would otherwise go out of business are able to be retooled to build components that Ukraine needs, particularly components for Ukrainian drones. This is very important. Ukraine, in many cases, assembles their drones from components they get from other countries, and so they don't just need the assembly, they need the components to be produced too. Germany can supply that, and they can supply that in Europe with logistics and supply routes that can access Ukraine reliably and quickly. So that's a good thing. It will help Ukraine survive
That's smart.
the war. And it's
I mean,
good for Germany.
That's smart. That's just changing the niche quick to make sure you don't go under the table. Then that's gonna, if they can find some of those good, juicy contracts where they can still keep their jobs, they can still keep the company running. That's a good thing. Then in the background, you will figure out something else. That way you can just go back to what you love, which is the auto industry production. But I think this is a great opportunity for Germany. And this is basically the German governor giving them a good opportunity, to keep themselves in the game. I'm talking about the auto industry, by the way.
Germany, it helps them reimagine, rebuild their image as an arms supplier. Now, I've already talked about how that is going to have large geopolitical impacts in the long term. I just want to point out that that's not really just theory. Already, Germany is in talks with Israel to supply major components for their Iron Dome. Components and pieces, technologies that typically may have been provided, for example, by the United States. It looks
Cheaper.
like Israel, too, even though they are very well under the US umbrella right now, would like to diversify away from relying on US support. This is a big deal. It shows that the current US foreign policy and the chaotic nature of it is spooking everybody, even our current allies, who are the beneficiaries of our current strategy, not the victims of it. But these people realize that the political culture in the United States that can change so quickly with a leader making such huge shifts, a lot of times that the people didn't even vote for, that'll spook anybody. And even people who can rely on the US right now, they're realizing, well, maybe we won't be able to rely on you in 10 years when there's a different administration in power. And so they are looking to diversify away from the United States. Germany is an example of that. Germany may get the biggest piece of that pie, it remains to be seen, but certainly that will be a massive geopolitical shift. When we look at everything that surrounds the US relationship with Israel right now, it's a contentious subject. I'm not going to get too into it. The pros and the cons, when people argue for those, it could be that that is coming from a different player in the future, or it's coming from a multitude of players in the future.
That's a good
more
angle.
than just the United States.
Yeah, that's a good angle.
That's a big shift in and of itself, almost unpredictable where that could go. So pay attention to Germany right now. Super important. Germany in the past has proven to be a driver of world affairs, and they have done that, I would argue, definitely for ill in the past. But their geographic location in the center of Europe, the advantages they have as a country, those are not predestined to be used for evil. Those could be used for good too. And with Germany trying to reinvent itself with a lot of those old advantages still in existence, they could very well be a powerhouse that we're not paying enough attention to. Now, I hope you enjoyed the discussion. If you did, definitely like the video. I love it.
Great video. He's very good at this, right? Of course, these are, these things can change. These opinions can just be modified. These opinions can just be the total opposite of what could happen in the future, that is. I must say that Germany has a great opportunity here to just grab the ball and just bring it home. However, I do think that the birth rate is very low to just even sustain such an investment in the long term. You need to have labor in that way you can just recover some taxes. However, if these things are not put into place, I think, yes, Germany can achieve that, but it's going to create a huge struggle in the future, because then you're gonna have less population to just even maintain that new infrastructure. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, guys. I will see you next one. I'm out.